to be again with Professor Abt with a lecture which I'm looking very much to listen to. And actually I would like you to know the relationship between this lecture and the message of the human organization. Because when I established this organization, I had a dream for this organization to be the
might work. I have said that we have now the surprise if that works. It works. Now, you see a mandala.
Yes.
Do you know who did it?
a fish.
A fish. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Isn't that a marvel?
Yes.
I mean, he has the computer program, this little fish, and he attracts the female with that. Isn't that a miracle that is in the depth of the water, in the depth of the unconscious?
Yes.
And now we will go to the next miracle. Do you know where that is? You remember it from last lecture?
Turkey.
That is the Göbekli Tepe. And this is, Tepe means hill. That is the hill, just in eastern Anatolia. And when you look from above, you see all these temple buildings that have been excavated, and you see always in the middle of a circle two pillars, and it is a circle, a complete circle that has been created by hunters and gatherers 12,000 years before our time. 12,000 years before our time. Stonehenge is 3,000 years old. It's a trifle in comparison. 12,000 years old, they have not had a king, they had not have a language, not a written language, they did not have any social structures, and they built these structures, these temples, as we can assume, because we have no documents of this time. The history started only much later. And when you look at that from above, that is an aerial view, you can see one circle occupies the other, and you know that they have just created one circle like that, and then they buried it, gave it back to Mother Nature, and created the same structure beside it. So obviously the creation of that structure was more important than the worship or whatever they did in that structure. And it reminds us of this wisdom of the pufferfish who was doing this mandala, this circular structure, to attract his female. And now when we continue, and here we see the flow of time, and you can see here we are today. That's the time of, as we call it, the Platonic month of Aquarius, and then you go back to the beginning of our time structure. We have the pharaonic culture, and you see just history started sometime around 3000 before our time, and we can see that pharaonic culture lasted up to 500 past our written time, and you can see that the first written history of mankind was mainly happening in pharaonic Egypt. Only little things compared to the pharaonic literature have been discovered in cuneiform, in Mesopotamia and other places. But you can see it's really a huge contribution of the pharaonic time, and then you go back, and you go back, and you go back, and there you find Göbekli Tepe, and here you find the first paintings of rock art in Chauvet or in Lascaux or whatever. Now, with the Untitled, we come to the first complete symbolic mapping of the beyond. The title of this book is, it is the Book of the Hidden Chamber, or the Hidden Realm, the Art Immanent. And you can see already here a beautiful paradox, because the Art Immanent is on the one hand a chamber that is the place of the coffin or of the tomb, and on the other hand it is also the realm, and it is a description of the whole collective unconscious that is also in a way the microcosm in our psyche. And then we can continue the journey of the sun god through the night. It goes from the gate of the west to the unified darkness. Keku Zemau. And this is a translation that we discussed, and it's so beautiful to see Dr. Damati here, because he shared the office of my teacher in Egyptology, Eric Hornung, and we were on various occasions together here in Luxor, translating the Untitled and the Book of Gates into English. And we were discussing this Keku Zemau on various occasions, because it is the hieroglyph of the lung with the two parts. And this uniting darkness, that is the end of the journey of the sun god, is not to be understood literally, but it is a symbol for the containing of the unconscious again in a symbolic way. Because when we don't have any more symbols to contain the beyond, to contain the unconscious, we are in trouble. Because then the devil is loose. Then the devil is all over the place. And we need that the unconscious, that dark side, that what is free-floating and no more contained, we need to contain it again. And then that is Keku Zemau, that is the unified or contained darkness again. And this is what is the task of each one of us, but also of our society. And this quest for immortality that we have then is that we try to just now accompany the sun god in his bark and see what he encounters in the beyond, because the sun god is the role model of a proper ego consciousness. If we can follow the sun god, then we can learn how we can and have to relate to the beyond and the contents of the beyond. Because that night world that is so nicely structured in the Untitled, in the 12 hours, is a clear division of this night world in the way that we can relate to it, and we will see each hour is then divided into 3 registers, and that shows us that the beyond is not just chaos. That's very consoling. And so it is not only the magic of Isis and Set that is needed, but mainly, as the title of the Untitled shows, knowledge for the afterlife of the individual is crucial. And then we have in this, at the end of the Untitled, we have, like in any modern scientific publication, we have the so-called abrégé, that is a summary, and that is required for any paper that we want to publish. And already the Amour, over 3,000 years ago, had already an abrégé. Isn't that amazing? Now that is the journey we will travel through the night, the 12 hours of the night. And you see, the sun is setting in the east, tired, old, the worn out sun, so to speak. And as we are also getting tired in the evening, except if we have to listen to lecture, we have to rejuvenate through the night by sleeping through the night. And what is so beautiful, in the morning the sun rises rejuvenated. So we will travel together with the sun god in his bark, that is called, as mentioned already, the golden bark. It is something that has to do with consciousness and it is the light of consciousness. And it's a linear path of 12 hours, but paradoxically, each hour is at the same time always also the whole blood, the whole beyond. And when we speak of the beyond, we have to understand today that this is another name for the unknown, unconscious. And when we speak today of the unconscious, we have to realize also it is not something that is below or above or left or right, but it's all over. It is something encircling us from all sides. Now, we start with the first hour. You see, very nicely structured, this first hour. You have here the different registers. Each bandage or each panel is a register, and the middle register is cut in two because there are so many figures here, and then the upper register is also, again, well structured. And you have to imagine that this journey of the sun god in his bark is taking place on the river Nile that flows below Egypt, that is, so to speak, the mirror image of the river Nile that we know here also in Cairo. And this river Nile of the beyond is flowing backwards to its own origin. Everything is different in the beyond. The time goes backward and the sun god gets rejuvenated and reappears young again. Something that we all would love, that would happen to us also. Now this first hour of this book of the hidden chamber, of the hidden realm, is that what we call today the collective unconscious or the objective psyche. And in the first hour, what we have just seen, it is a state between this world and the beyond. It is a first structured appearance of the beyond, and you see on both sides, the upmost register and the down register, these are the banks of the river Nile, and in between is the river Nile flowing, and you see the bark is just on this is just a symbol for the river Nile, and here you have again a bark with this already the rejuvenated scarab, the rejuvenated sun god. And now you see that these two sides, the upper register and the lower register, is very, very structured. All was in squares. And squares have a very comforting signal for us, because when you see squares, for instance square fields or square rooms, like we have a square here where we have now this lecture, it is all culture. It is something that man has made, because we know that the world does not have any corners. We have just nature that creates trees and creates flowers and creates all sort of beautiful things, but to see squares, that has to do with culture, with consciousness. And when you see all these different gods in the upper and the lower register, you see that it is comforting that this entry into the beyond is not completely throwing us into chaos. And so we have these groups of 9 or 12 godheads, and in the middle register we have the golden bark of the sun god, who is moving on the Nile of the night through the 12 hours of the night. And you will see that there are 2 mud goddesses, and this is right here. You find them, the 2 mud goddesses. They are in front of him, but in fact, as everything is inversed in the beyond, they are following his arc. But it is in the following of the sun god, the 2 muds, the mud, the proper order and the proper justice and the proper laws of nature, the proper constitution of the world, as it is also to be called. That mud is one for this world, and the other one mud is for the other world. So that we have always these 2 muds. And you see the different groups here of 9 pavians here, 12 serpent goddesses here, then again a group of 3 here, and then again a group of 12. 3 times 3, so a group of 9. And you see that would invite for a long, long amplification. I can assure you we would be sitting still till the morning here to accompany the sun god through the 12 hours. If I would amplify all the different hours in detail. And we would happily wake up in the morning and say, wow, have we been 12 hours on the way? No, I will not do that, and you will definitely agree that it would be stupid. Now, we continue. We enter the second hour. The second hour, a flowing process. It's a process like we in religious circles, we do pilgrimages, isn't it? And a pilgrimage is also a process. We do process, and it flows now, and you see the sun god here, the bark of the sun god is here, and you see the middle register has again been split because there are so many deities, and it was not possible to bring it all on this panel. And this is these pictures that you see here, they come from the tomb of Tutmosis III, and the tomb of Tutmosis III has also experienced a facsimile, and it was the heart of an exhibition. Is the name The Quest for Immortality, and this exhibition has also traveled in the United States and in Europe in various places. And this is a photograph that is now also published in the book with the English translation of Eric Hornung, this Untitled, the journey of the sun god through the 12 hours. And now this second hour has at the main theme it is the water of Vernus, the water of Osiris. It's the water that makes all the grain grow and fertilizes the soil with that fertilizer that comes from the river Nile, and all that, or it used to come from the river Nile, and and the gods of the beyond are nourished on the one hand side by the presence of the sun god. When the sun god enters this second hour, the gods of the beyond, they are extremely happy and welcome the sun god who enters here in the park. And he is, by his presence, by his light, he is nourishing the beyond, but at the same time, the beyond is nourishing him. So that is what we experience once we start to look at the beyond, at our dreams, at our fantasies, and take all this, what we cannot understand, serious and try to understand that. Then we get all of a sudden, strange enough, but it is like that, we get nourished too by the unconscious. So the gods of the beyond are nourished and provide nourishment. And then we go to the third hour, we see again the same river Nile, the bark of the sun god. Uh-oh. I think I made some mistake. Never mind.
This is the second one.
Well, it's good. You recognize it deeply now. You call that teaching by repetition. Here we are in the third hour, and you see again the different barges, and you hardly recognize what is what, because all the different barks are somehow mutilated, somehow deficient of something. There is something missing in each one of these hours. So all the barks have something missing, and the closing texts of these 3 first hours is something that is quite amazing, because in these closing texts of these first 3 hours we find this dialogue between the sun god and all the gods of the beyond. And it is, we have on the one hand side orders given, and on the other side you have praise of the sun god and praise of the beyond for the arriving of the sun god. Now we come to the next hour. Now we have no more the water that we saw in these hours before. You see, here we have the water, and now what we see is all is in the fire. It is dark. All of a sudden it became dark in this hour, and we have a path that is broken, and we have really a situation of darkness, of not knowing, and the sun god can communicate just with these beings of the beyond, but it is something that is, one could call this experience of despair when we, in our own process for rejuvenation, for instance in a midlife crisis, all of a sudden don't see anymore how things could proceed. And it is so helpful to know that this is part of rejuvenation. And we will see that later on that this darkness or this blackness is a prerequisite for all renewal. And we are just so afraid of our own renewal that we rather would deny that there is an unconscious than to face the objective psyche, to face what we cannot understand, to accept that there are fantasies or desires that we cannot control or we cannot understand why it is like that. But we should enter that darkness like the sun god who is our role model and try to dialogue with the beyond and see what is meant by it all. So with the fourth hour, the realm of the desert, the realm of Seth, the realm of the fire, the realm of complete darkness is there, a reality of our own inner psyche, but still there is a communication of the sun god with the gods of this hour possible. And now comes something amazing. What you see here is the tomb of Tutmosis III from above. That's just a sketch from above. That is the tomb. Here is the antechamber. Here you come down, and here is the antechamber with all the list of the gods of the beyond. And then here we have traveled now through the 4 hours of the Unduat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there is a jump to the 5th hour here. And that is quite amazing. What is the meaning? Is that just done by accident, or is there a meaning? No. In ancient Egypt, nothing was an accident. And you can, when you read the texts, you can also see that it is said in the Amduat that the first 3 hours have to be in the west, and then the next 2 hours in the south, and then comes the north, and then comes the east. So it is quite deliberately a jump from the 4th hour to the 5th hour. And when you look at the 5th hour, you will see that it is quite amazing. The 5th hour is, in fact, very close or just besides the end of the 12th hour. So the 5th hour is a first rejuvenation, and then comes the 6th and the 7th and all the other hours till the sunrise. So it is right here a connection, and this hour is right in the east. When you look at the I have been in the tomb with my compass. You know, I always wear a compass here, it's not a gun. That's my compass. And when I was standing at the place of where the sarcophagus stands, and I was making with my compass the direction, it was exactly to the east. So at that time, that's really also a miracle, they were able to just know where is the sunrise, where is the east. I mean, not only the puffer fish is very intelligent, but the ancient Egyptians were also extremely intelligent. Only we have probably lost a little bit that connection to the knowledge of nature. So, we have now the 5th hour, and you see that is now the land of Sokrat. By the way, when we have now to the 5th hour, I just would like to know how long I have a budget of time. Can I go on?
Yeah. So, no, you can go on as you like.
All right, I can
No,
go.
as you want.
Take the morning. Okay.
Take the morning.
All right. Okay. I'm done. Okay. Now the
Combining the
5th.
bark.
Say again?
Combining the bark of the rock. We have to combine the bark of the rock. Through the night, we have
To accompany the
Oh, we have to accompany, yes. We have really, I am more than happy just to now do that, continue. You see here the bark of the sun god, and you see they are pulling him now over that mountain of Isis, and here it is really a huge effort to overcome the struggle with the opposites. And down below you can see the cave of Sokar. You have already the completion of that first unification of the sun god with Sokar, with the with the god of the beyond. That Sokar is the god from Lower Egypt, while we have in Upper Egypt then Osiris, who was then becoming the main god of the beyond. And here we have a first unification, a first union of these opposites. And in this way we have the 5th hour as the passing of the realm of Sokar, passing this realm of the god of the dead, and the first renewal of the sun disk. And in this way we have the first part of the work. And this first part of the work is something that we will find later on in alchemy as the 2 parts of the rejuvenation of the sun god or of consciousness. Now we can continue with the 2nd part, and we have just to remember the essential prerequisites for the sun god's journey to his rejuvenation. There are a few prerequisites. I just mentioned a few things, but they are essential. As mentioned before, the 2 mud goddesses that accompany the sun god throughout the 12 hours. The second is the golden bark, the golden container of consciousness. Consciousness needs to have a container, otherwise it will just dissolve in the unconscious, and then you have a lunatic and not anything else. Because with no container you are just flooded by the unconscious. And then the help for the gods in the beyond, for the ancestors, by respecting them. That is an essential prerequisite, as we will see in detail just in the following hour. The sun god needs the help from the beyond and needs to help for the gods of the beyond, and the gods of the beyond, they are the ancestors. As we know, they are all our ancestors, including this wonderful little pufferfish. He is also an ancestor of ours, and he is also showing that the creation of the mandala will attract the opposite. And when we create ourselves mandalas, as Jung did in the Red Book, he could attract the beyond, he could attract God, and he could contain it. Now we come to the 6th hour. And in the 6th hour, you have something very special. I wanted to make it big, but I don't dare to touch that screen anymore. I'm very afraid that I might blow it up. So I will just do it. And as I don't have any pointer, because I have a new jacket. You know why?
Of course.
Here we have the bark of the sun god again. Here you have the lower register, here you have the upper register. And there would be lots of things to be said for each one of these gods. But I only want to point out, here you have a crucial scene for the restoration of the ice. But what I want really to draw your attention to is this group of the 4 kings of Upper Egypt and the 4 kings of Lower Egypt, just before we have for the first time in the pharaonic tradition the so-called tail in mouth, or Ouroboros, the serpent that bites its own tail. And right before that happens, you have all the ancestors of the pharaohs previous to this Tutmosis III, whom we see here. And these ancestors were absolutely crucial for the rejuvenation of the pharaonic tradition. And when you go to Abydos, we will go together afterwards, when you go to Abydos and you see the corridor there, you have Seti I, Sethos I, who is showing his son Ramses II. Now later Ramses II. He shows his son all the ancestors, the whole past of pharaonic culture. And he shows it to them. And that was always a prerequisite of any successful rejuvenation. And afterwards came the period of the Ramessides and also the high culture of the New Kingdom and always this rejuvenation. And you have these pharaohs here all together, and the number 4 is a complete number. So you have like the 4 directions of the sky, or the 4 elements, or whatever you take as the number 4, it's a number of completeness. So the complete pharaohs of Upper and Lower Egypt, and it was always a 2 oneness that was a prerequisite. It was never mingled to a oneness, but it was always a 2 oneness. Like Horus and Set, they had to always be together to bind and stabilize the state of Egypt. So here afterwards you see these Ouroboros and the corpse of the sun god already together with the rejuvenated Jung god, the scarab. And this is that what happens right after the 5th hour, and we will now continue to travel. The connection with all the ancestors was the prerequisite of the 6th hour, and the first container, the tail in mouth, or the Ouroboros, for the corpse of the sun god. And now comes something very exciting. Now comes the 7th hour. And I remember I was having, I had various block courses here in Egypt where I took people from our Center for Depth Psychology, or once I took a group of American analysts also for a journey, and then I went with them also to the tomb of Tutmosis III. And I was explaining what I was now explaining here with the hours, and we went to the 5th hour, the 6th hour, and then we came to the 7th hour. And then I said, and here we see the sun, the bark of the sun god, that is encounters the huge apophis or apep, snake, serpent, the huge serpent apep, as it is called in the Egyptian language, and apophis is then the Greek name that was given to this serpent. And it is the serpent that has been drinking up all the water of the river Nile, and it is now just trying to stop the further procedure of this bark of the sun god. And it is so horrific. It is having a hideous face, and I was just describing this apophis serpent, how it is just making a huge noise, and it is a terrible thing to encounter that serpent, and at that very moment the light went out. And nobody had a flashlight, and nobody had, and they really were scared. I tell you, it took not just a minute, it took an eternity till the light came back again.
So they had experienced.
They had experienced. I was sorry that the light was not going out right now. But if you have such an experience, I will never forget that moment. It was just, I don't know who was screaming us. Anyway, so you see here, here you see Isis in front of the bark, and here you see Saint in front of the bark. And they are the great magicians. And when they say you don't need any magic in the Unduat, that's completely wrong, because thanks to their magic, that is the science of Isis, the science of the feminine goddess, or the science of Mephisto, or the science of the devil that knows also magic. It is that science that helps that it can move on. And you have here Selkis, Sekhmet, that is cutting Apophis into pieces. So these are the two things that are now taking place. On the one hand side, you see here it's like a glass wall. It's like a wall, but you can see through. And that is the origin of the alchemical vessel. And you can see that the miracle of glass is that it isolates. You can see through, but you are not overwhelmed by the contents inside. And then Sekhmet, the scorpion goddess, is making an analysis of this Apophis serpent. You see, it is cut into pieces. That is what we call today analysis.
Sorry, Sekhmet or Selket? Sekhmet or Selket?
Say it again?
Is it Sekhmet or Selket?
That is Sekhmet, and Selkis is the same. Sechem means power, the power, and Sekhmet is the powerful.
lioness.
Yeah. Now, here in this 7th hour, you see this encounter with Abt or Apophis, and then you see the magic of Isis and Set. And in the middle register we have like a glass wall between the bark and the sun god. That later will be the retort of alchemy. Sekhmet's or Sekhmet's knife of discrimination is needed to cut Apophis into pieces.
Wasn't that Selkis, this scorpion goddess?
Yes, yes.
You
The
said
scorpion
Selkis?
Yes. It's also an aspect of that dangerous dark side of nature. Yeah, that helps. Now we come to the 8th hour. And now in this 8th hour you see they are all the gods that we see here are sitting on the hieroglyph for cloth. And you see here the sun god and his bark being towed. And here he is protected by the serpent, Mehen serpent, and that is a protection that he has from now on through all the following nights. And you see that all the figures are now directed to the sunrise. It's a movement that goes now direction to the sunrise. And in this 8th hour, where we have all these godheads, you see they are resurrecting from their tombs, and all the different goddesses and gods are getting new clothes. They are rejuvenated, or we can say we can understand them now when we have a symbolic attitude towards these figures or these godheads, these different goddesses and gods. And then comes the 9th hour, and now it flows and flows and flows. You see, all look again towards the sunrise, and you see all the rowers and all the energy is now going towards the sunrise, and that is this 9th hour, where now all are heading towards east. And we come to the 10th hour, and you see here it is the restoration of the eyes. You have the small eye, the small light and the big light, and you will see that we have here so many different themes that we could get stuck in this 10th hour as well. But we continue and just have the restoration of the two eyes, the small eye and the big eye. And here you see the two eyes are watching us. It's not the big brother that is watching us, but it is the moon eye and the sun eye, the two eyes that are required for a proper view. And we have lost that. We have only one eye anymore. We have only the eye of the day, the sun eye. But the moon eye of the night, we have lost, or we consider that this eye is not important. We don't have to see what we dream during night. And that's why we have become partly blind. So the 11th hour is the appearance of the two eyes, the two seeing eyes, and the eye of the sun and the eye of the moon. And here we are now entering the 12th hour, and you have to imagine the 12th hour is just besides the Here you see the daughters of the 5th hour. That was just, here is the 5th hour, and here now is the sun god's bark is pulled through the serpent Apophis, and this serpent has the same outlook as what we have encountered in the 7th hour. I will go back. I am not so smart that I cannot go directly back, but I will go back this way. You see Apophis here. He has the same head, the same appearance of, it is just, here it is against the bark, here is the opposite. This is what we experience when we go into the unconscious. We find all of a sudden some dangers, some opposing energies to our rejuvenation. And if we are able, if we know the beyond, if we have knowledge of what is in the beyond, if we know about the dangers and all that, then it will turn the other way, and after some time we will have exactly what we have here. The energy is flowing. Now it is flowing through, and
No resistance anymore.
no resistance, and complete rejuvenation. And here you see the scarab pushing the sun over the horizon between the two pylons of the temple or whatever. And I just would like now to celebrate that also. Water of life. And now you see, with the 12th hour, it is the end of the journey, and it's called Keku Semau. Semau is that unifying, and Keku is that darkness that is now contained or understood or could help the whole process of rejuvenation. And what was first appearing as an obstacle in the 7th hour is now giving birth to the rejuvenated sun. Now comes a question. Dr. Arya, would you like to make a pause?
Before the questions, do you mean?
Or before I continue with the second half of the lecture, because we are in the middle now, but I could imagine that it is too much, and we can, whatever.
We enjoyed very much the trip. So
Yes.
I'd like to continue.
You would like to continue?
Yes.
Agree?
No break.
No break, okay? And no questions?
No. In the 6 hours, appears the Apophis, right?
Yes?
What is the significance here of the Apophis? 6 hours for the
Well, that is, I want to have a break.
When you said break, then people
Just a little bit.
then again, I think it's very now we are really contained. So
Okay.
that
That is good.
it's up to you. Would you like more a break or
We continue. But it's a very important little question. What was the significance of the Ouroboros in the 6th hour? Remember the serpent that has the tail in the mouth? That is a very crucial symbol that was later on in alchemy also a crucial symbol. And it means that nature can contain nature. It is a help by nature to contain the infinity of nature. And it is a wonderful symbol. We might come back to it later on. I will continue to keep that.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Now, I would like just to make this journey with you after we have gone through the 12 hours. I would like to invite you to the Osiris complex in Abydos as an amplification for the understanding of the Amdua. I may assume that all of you have knowledge of the Osiris complex of Abydos.
Not really.
Not really, then you have to visit it. And I just encourage a visit to Abydos. I have been almost 100 times in Egypt, and I have been probably 90 times in Abydos. Each time I make a pilgrimage to Abydos. So I think it is a must for you. Now, first we have the Osirification in the Osiris Hall. That is, you have to go through the chapel of Osiris, and then you come to the 3 Osiris halls that are just behind the Osiris chapel, and there you have this incredible process where the erection of the jet pillar takes place. And this erection of the jet pillar is a miracle if you look at it closely, and you have for that really to go to Abydos to see it, because you cannot see it really here, but it has a face. This jet pillar has a face. It is living matter, and matter is not dead for pharaonic culture, as it is not dead for many cultures in this world. It's only with our rational, materialistic point of view that we think that matter is not alive. That plants don't suffer when we pluck them, that trees don't suffer when we cut them, and all that. Anyway, here you have the resurrection of the jet pillar, and by that is the resurrection of Osiris, of the dead Osiris. And this resurrection takes place with the help of Isis and the help of Sethos the first, as the big human being, the divine human being that was inside Sethos, and the Pharaoh is just a little servant helping. Here you see him, the little figure. You see him again here, cut out, but it is the little human figure that is the human helping the big divine figure. And this is what is later on in alchemy always that saying where the stone of the sages, that is also the living stone, the stone who can speak, the stone crying out and saying, "Help me that I can help you." This is what the unconscious says to us also. Help me. Help to understand me. Help me that my dreams come true, that my dreams can be understood. Help me, and I can help you. Because if I can help the dreams to be understood, the dreams will help me to understand what is the meaning of my life. That is the miracle of the unconscious. And that is the miracle of Abydos, that this Abydos was the place where the Osiris resurrection was celebrated again and again. And it was each year we have the ancestor rituals taking place. And each year you have this resurrection of Osiris. And when that could take place, the pharaonic culture could rejuvenate again. And that is this amazing thing that this holiest of the holy place of Egypt and the world is just cut through by electric wires, and the highway is also on the way of being built through the tombs of the first pharaohs placed there. But that is just a side remark. I would like just to continue. Now, what was important 3,000 years ago is also our task today. And you have probably the greatest Egyptian who was ever alive, was a figure about whose life we almost know nothing. He is coming from Achmim, from Panopolis, and his name is Zosimos. And Zosimos was a role model of a human being who was able to realize that journey of the sun god during lifetime already. So this man on the other side of the river Nile was asking Zosimos to help him to fight this Apophis serpent. And in the dream, you know what Zosimos did? It is said he jumped in one leap over the river Nile. He didn't hesitate for a moment to help that voice that called him from the other side, from the unconscious. So he leaped over, and then he tried to fight this serpent. And it was actually our work. Salva, my Arabic teacher, is sitting here, and we were translating this more than once, this dream, and we have been working on this text of Zosimos باستمرار. And Zosimos afterwards stayed faithful to his dreams for the rest of his life. And we know many of his dreams, his visions. C.G. Jung has interpreted some of his dreams. And it is really incredible to realize that this Zosimos here we go. Sorry, I'm not that much used to this. What you see here is a picture of Zosimos. Now we will all look like that. Because it is Zosimos in his winding sheets. Zosimos mummified in his winding sheets. This is the dead Zosimos, and he had a student, Zosimos, that was called Theosebea, and Theosebea was either a priestess or a queen. We have different manuscripts, and some manuscripts she's a priestess, and some manuscripts she's a queen. And Zosimos was her teacher. And as it can happen, when you have a teacher, it can be your writing teacher or your music teacher or whatever, you can fall in love with your teacher. And what can also happen is that the teacher can fall in love with his student. Or the teacher, whatever, the analyst and the client, they can also start to have feelings for each other. And we know that Zosimos and Theosobeia were very close. And Theosobeia was madly in love with her teacher, and Zosimos was madly in love with her. And then, of course, as she was a queen or a priestess, they couldn't leave that out. There was no way of a biological relationship. But by holding it in the vessel, that fire, that huge emotion that can come up and flood us, by containing it in the retort, in later alchemy it was the retort, by looking at it, or by, like in the 7th hour, by seeing it but not being overwhelmed by it, Zosimos was the teacher of the whole psychology, what we call today transference and counter-transference. And it was, he could transform that energy of destructive energy of living it out biologically. He could transform it into true eros, and he was the teacher of all of alchemy that came later on. And he was the first historical alchemist that we know, and he was a milestone in human evolution. And all later Arabic alchemy, that's what I pointed out later on with Ibn Umayl and so on. All Latin alchemy, Paracelsus, Dorneus, etc., etc., and Jung later on, all connect to Zosimos, and Jung was even hunching, smelling that Zosimos was the alchemist, and he interpreted his dreams, and we have that as a document today.
So you could make the conjunction between the anima and the animus inside
Yes, yes. I cannot go into all the details because I have to find the exit, otherwise we will be sitting in the morning still here. I'm sorry, but you can see there is so much to be said. That,
Is this picture a combination between Zosimos and his student?
yes, here, this picture he made for Theosobeia. He made a whole picture series, and we have translated that book. It's available. It's in the library, I assume. And he made this picture series for her. And when it came to this picture, he showed her, this is me in my golden winding sheets, in my, like a mummy. So he experienced his death already, alive. And then Theosobeia says, and who killed you? And then he said, you killed me. Beautiful, isn't it? So he could admit that he was killed by her, and then of course she complains and says, how can a weak lady like me kill such a big man and such a huge teacher and such a sheikh and whatever. And then he explains in detail, and it is a wonderful text. Coming from Egypt, by the way, it was it was here in this lying in probably in a mosque library here in Cairo, and Osman Hamdi, the archaeologist from the Osmanic time, has obtained that manuscript and brought it to Istanbul, and that's where I could find it in the archaeological museum, and I could make a facsimile of it, and it is now back in Cairo as a facsimile. You can study it. And it's a marvelous text. It will need probably generations till we appreciate what he did. And so it is, you see the parallels. This is from Tutankhamun, and this is Zosimos, and it is during lifetime that what was projected into the beyond with all the books from the afterlife is now brought into the life, into our task. It's a task for us today. And that is now the last point. So we see already a light in the tunnel. And the Unduat in the light of the unconscious time problem means that we have to see that alchemy as the emerging myth of our time, the marriage of the day world and the night world, that is, of course, that huge task today that it has to do with relationship, face-to-face relationship, and especially also the relationship between men and women. The man-woman relationship was the core of Zosimus's teaching, with animus and anima, as you mentioned it. And I just have a few last points to make. Today we have become soletics. You know what that means?
No,
Comes from soul. Soul is the Latin word for sun. And luna is the Latin word for moon. And we put the people who are possessed by the moon, we put to Abbaseya. Those possessed by the sun, we let them walk around freely. We have all become soletics. We are not lunatics, but we worship only the sun, the daylight, like Echnaton, who was the first soletic in this way. And it is a tragedy that we have lost our moon eye, and it is as much of a problem as being lunatic, this one-sidedness of our time. And you might know this wonderful verse of Shakespeare that is a timeless saying in Hamlet, when it is said, "To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man." That is what we have to learn. And we have to learn, and that is what was the teaching of also C.G. Jung. By the way, also your father, and I read your book, and I was reading about your introduction to the book of your father, and I wanted to have it here and quote, but then I realized I would spend the whole lecture just quoting your foreword and your father's foreword, and I would just be lost. But I am very, very happy that I can see that we have to learn to live with the unconscious, whether it is C.G. Jung or whether it is Sufi master, as your father was. And what we will have to end up is, again, we have to name in the future psychology, human psychology, whose origin is found in ancient Egypt. Yes. And that is the message of ancient Egypt, and I am very, very grateful and happy that I was able to do that here in this group. And I just would like just to, as a dessert, I have something, a summary of the alchemical work. Have you ever seen this picture? It comes from a manuscript from that lies in the British Library. It is a wonderful manuscript with these colored images, and the text you don't, it does not relate to the picture. It is nonsensical. It is something that has been just done by a copyist who didn't understand much. But you have the whole connection in one picture. Here you have the so-called devil with horns, but the devil is in fact Osiris, It is mercurial, the mercurial spirit of the unconscious that has been turned into a devil by the book religions, who just, they're too much splitting the opposites, except for great exceptions and great masters like the Shaykh, as the father of the Shaykh al-Azhar, who was living in Upper Egypt, who was one of these great masters. And they realized that the dream spirit is not just having a negative side. Of course, he brings the seductive serpent that kills the old king by biting him into his thigh, like in the Grey legends where the old king was bitten in the thigh and is killed by that. But you see, with one hand he kills, and with the other hand he teaches the same king the rejuvenation by teaching him how to create the elixir in the bottle that revivifies him and makes him to resurrect again. Isn't it amazing? And here you have another picture from the same manuscript. And here you see the alchemist playing his drum out of joy. Here you see it was Christian, a Coptic bishop from Atrib in the Delta. The bishop from Atrib who created that picture. And this bishop was, of course, for him, Jesus was the first fish, and the second fish is the Antichrist. And you see the transformation of the dangerous Antichrist, that is like a shark. You see, it is transformed through the tree of life, of one's individual life. So the evil of our world can only be integrated and transformed by individuals, not by the mass. But the mass or the flock of people can be synchronistically inspired by an individual who is doing that work for all of us. And C.G. Jung was such a personality who was doing this work, and there are other sheikhs and other great masters who did that for us, so that we can also have an orientation in this confused world of ours. And so the last picture is just this picture where you see the alchemist. It's from Latin alchemy, a picture that has guided me throughout my life. I love that picture. It is the alchemist, you see with his lantern, and he comes from this house over here. He came over the bridge, and he follows the footprints of Mother Nature that is shining in the moon. Here is the moon, and she is the guide, and the footprints are what is left by Mother Nature when we wake up in the morning, namely our dreams. So this is what I would like to stop here, and I wish you all good dreams.
Very much to thank Professor Abt for this wonderful lecture, and you can see that the beginning is, it is the same trip that we have the 12 hours were really resumed in this picture. And then we are, actually this is our journey. It's every human journey. We have to go through this journey because we are in the dark and we are always looking for the sun. But in order to look for the sun, we have to take this journey within the dark in ourselves, then we can really see the daylight. So it is that continuation or that kind of integration between opposites is what we really looking forward within ourselves, because we tend always to put things in opposition and conflict. And what we need is reconciliation. And if we reconcile with ourselves, then we can reconcile with the world around us. We can create a new world by accepting other people and containing them within ourselves. And this is, I think this is something that everyone should do in order to create our dream of a peaceful world. Peaceful world with dark and light. And thank you very much. And announce that we'll have Shahrazad on the 23rd of January. Shahrazad is from Persia, from Iran, and she lives in America, and she is a disciple of Professor Abt, and she will give us an interesting lecture. I will send the summary of her lecture on the WhatsApp. Everyone, I wish that everyone here, you who came for the first time, would like to just give us Ines here, or Ahmed. You can just take the number, the 4 numbers, so they can be added to our list, and that is very important. After the question, I hope that you enjoy some just refreshments after the reception, after the question. Yes. You would like to ask?
Professor Abt, when you said the 4th hour and then the 5th hour went right to the east, I couldn't help but remember the non-REM sleep was the 4 stages, and then you go into this paradoxical sleep, the dreaming, and you start looking into the unconsciousness with the dreaming. And could they possibly have made this connection, or am I emphasizing?
Well,
it's the opposite direction out of the paradoxical sleep with the dream world.
Yeah. Well, it's a very complex situation, because it's like in alchemy where you have first a work for the moon and then a work for the sun, or first you have the ossification and then the reification, and that is also seen in the Amduat, but it is very paradoxical, because it takes place again and again that comes the moon aspect more in the foreground, and then the sun aspect again in the foreground. And I'm afraid that this is so complicated that I have to refer to our publications that we had made on this topic in the Corpus Alchemicum Arabicum, volume 3. Is a text of Zosimos.
So answer the question.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for a very interesting lecture. I would like to have some advices about giving birth to our lunar eye again, our moon eye again. Is it about, for example, writing our dreams, or can you just give us some advices with regards to this?
Yes, I think this is a really a crucial question, because
What is the question, sir? What is the question?
The question is, how can we really honor the night world ourselves? Is it just by writing down dreams, or what can we do about it to redeem the moon eye, or to renew the moon eye that is lost? And this is such a difficult question where I cannot give any recipe. I can only say that definitely it is very, very helpful if we start to look inside and write down our dreams, if we look inside and take our fantasies serious, if we look at our autonomous complexes, where we, for instance, become furious and we don't know why. That is what usually happens when you marry, and then and then the wife says, all of a sudden, that is not the man I married, because he is becoming like a baby and whining, and, or she becomes like a shark. So we have this crisis.
I have to secure your access.
That's why it will be
no security. You're the majority in the room.
Or sharks.
You know, all these are possibilities to get to know ourselves. We have to realize that self-knowledge is really the essential prerequisite for peace, because, you know, with our shadow it starts, because our shadow is such a, you know, we think we have no more shadow. And that is the problem. And we have sold our shadow to the devil. And he gives us, there's a beautiful story about from Chamisso about the man with no shadow. He was a poor man, and he just the devil came and said, no, don't worry, I can help you. I give you shoes, and with each step you can make 7 miles. And I give you a purse that is never empty, filled with gold coins. The only thing you have to give me is your shadow. And then it's so beautifully described how the devil rolled up quietly the shadow, and he went away with the shadow. And then this poor man had all of a sudden, everything was wonderful he had, and he could travel and check everywhere. But then people who saw him all of a sudden realized that he had no shadow, and so he had always to walk a little bit close to the wall where you wouldn't see that he doesn't have a shadow. He had always to hide that he has no shadow. That's what we do today also. It all starts with accepting that I have a shadow, and what you said, we have to have the light and the dark, and we have to realize that it belongs together, and all these aspects need to be looked at. And of course it would be great in time to build up some community that where dreams can be also face to face be discussed, because we don't discuss dreams in a collective, because it's so individual. And I remember I had so bad experiences with collective analysis, where they wanted to have group analysis and things like that. It's a horror, because it just kills that uniqueness of each individual. And that's why it is very important that we will build up. We have a trainee who is studying in Switzerland in our Center for Depth Psychology.
Yes.
She was always hiding.
This is my shadow.
And Scheherazade is also an analyst in California and doing wonderful work. And I mean, if you have any questions
I
with
have a
regard to
question,
that.
Dr. Abt. How can we explain and understand our dreams? If we have a dream, how can
Here,
That course.
like some question I will save you answering them because
Oh, wonderful.
okay. I'm asking about how to explain your dreams. This is something. This is a course on its own.
Okay.
So it cannot be explained in the lecture. You see, because but you give attention to your dream. Give attention to your dream. Write them, and then it will talk to you. But how are you going to do this? This is you need some guidance from someone like Sameh, for example.
Or like you.
And I will take one more question, and okay, you will have a question. All right, but I will have.
It is not a question, but it's a comment, if you allow me,
Yes,
Professor.
yes, sure.
I have enjoyed very much your presentation, and
And you please introduce yourself,
Thank
because
you.
you told me that you are a psychologist.
my name is Muhammad Abdel Fattah. I am a professor of psychiatry at University of British Columbia in Canada. I deal mainly with the biological aspect of humanity, and of course you deal mainly with the psychosocial aspect of humanity. The biopsychosocial approach is the best to deal with your question here about
the night by 12 hours. At the same paradigm, can we divide the human life in 12 parts, or 1 year, 12 months? So there is a months that are sunset, are parallel to sunset, and months that are parallel to sunrise.
Well, I think that would be exaggerating. I would think that we have to also see that the life circle, we have to rejuvenate in each and every night. And it is a symbolic journey that is to take place daily, and at the same time, I can answer that with that. Let me just see if I find that. Look here. Here you have the journey of the 12 hours of the day. Here it is the journey of the 12 months of the year, and the rebirth of the year in spring. Here you see we have, you cannot read it, but waking up in the morning is the waking up from the night. Waking up of vegetation is the waking up of the year. Waking up of the biological life is with the midnight. You have we are born in midnight and then become adult, and then the biological life, and then we disappear in the evening. And then we have becoming an individual. That is also a circle. And to become an individual is also we are born as an individual, and we have to become aware of it, wake up to it, and then we have to develop it by cultivating our tree. And as Muhammad ibn Umayr says so beautifully with the tree of life, you have to give it water, with that water of life of the unconscious. You have to give it water that it can grow. And if you stop giving it water, it will not grow any further. But if you come back and give water again, it will continue to grow. That's beautiful.
You have one question?
My colleague here asked about how can we interpret how do we waken up our lunar eye? Is it by writing our dreams, which is part of it? Or what about drawing mandalas, as Jung did when Jung was drawing mandalas or making his patient draw mandalas and translate or interpret their dreams, if sometimes somebody who did not study any psychoanalysis but is an artist and can draw, can interpret his dreams or understand or get a message or awaken the lunar eye by drawing?
Inshallah.
I would like, before we leave, I would like to thank everybody who came to this meeting. But I would like to thank our friend, Professor Abt, for being with us today. But in particular as well, I would like to recognize and acknowledge the presence of Dr. Damati, His Excellency Minister Damati, a former Minister of Antiquity, and Professor Fathi Saleh, who has won prizes in antiquity, although he's Professor of Computer Science. But I would encourage that Your Excellency and Professor Saleh will say something before we leave. Just a second, please. Okay.
Only I have to thank you very much. Thank you, and Professor Abt for this opportunity to be here with you today and to listen to one of the wonderful literature about the belief of eternal life in ancient Egypt. It is part of this, the whole belief of the Egyptians of the continuity and eternal life. Imidwat, one of the most important holy books, as we can say, in ancient Egypt, who guided us also for the ancient Egyptian belief as road for other beliefs in the world, in ancient beliefs of the world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. When I was in Berlin visiting the museum in Berlin, the lady director of the museum, she mentioned Professor Damati was very excited about the scholarship, that he is a scholar. And we do not appreciate ourselves and our people who really put the image of Egypt very high. It's a pleasure having you, sir.
Inshallah. I follow the steps of Dr. Damat. No, in fact, I was wondering while listening to this wonderful lecture, because for a long time I was trying to understand the night of 12 hours of the ancient Egyptians, but really today I'm mastering it. But the question that came to my mind, you should always remember that it's the ancient Egyptians who divided the day into 12 hours and the night into 12 hours. And this is the tradition that we are using everywhere in the world now after the ancient Egyptian statement of that 12 hours for the night and 12 hours for the day. And in fact, they were even measuring it. I mean, they have charts with the sequence of stars that sets every night, and there are 12 stars that sets in the night, and that's why the night became 12 hours, and then they divided the day according to 12 hours. So I just came to my mind talking about these 12 hours today. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank everyone, and I think just to go for the reception.
Next room.